Hello friends, welcome to Wow IS. This is the second part of the May 2023 current affairs, and in this video we are going to cover international relations. This is part of our Wow initiatives in which we are providing you crisp summaries of the Vision monthly magazines from April 2023 to February 2024, and it is at a nominal price of 599 rupees. You can pay through this QR code and you can send the payment receipt at our mail ID. Now let's start with the IR international relations part for today. The first article that we have today is 25 years of nuclear Pokhran nuclear test. On May 11, 2023, India celebrated 25 years of the Pokhran 2 nuclear test. There were 3 nuclear detonations that were done under the code name Operation Shakti. It was the second nuclear test and the first nuclear test, whose name was Operation Smiling Buddha, was done on May 18th, 1974. Now, next thing here comes is India's nuclear doctrine. India released its draft nuclear doctrine in 1999, and in January 2003, India released its official nuclear doctrine. India has a nuclear command authority which is chaired by Prime Minister, and it has an executive council which is chaired by National Security Advisor. National Security Advisor or Executive Council provides input for the decisions making by the National Command Authority and executes directives given by the Political Council. Next thing is India's nuclear doctrine. India's nuclear doctrine says that first of all, building and maintaining a credible minimum deterrence. Second, massive nuclear retaliation to inflict unacceptable damage. So first one is that India is going to maintain a minimum deterrent, so that India is going to have a nuclear arsenal which can maintain the minimum deterrent. It is not going to maximize it. It wants just to create a deterrent for the other states. Secondly, if India is attacked, India is then going to move with a massive nuclear retaliation, so that the other party or other state is not able to retaliate back. Third, no use of nuclear weapon against non-nuclear weapon states. So it gives a implication that India is going to use nuclear weapons in just as a deterrent, and is not going to use it against non-nuclear state. Then fourth one is control on exports of nuclear and missile related materials and technologies, moratorium on nuclear tests. That means no more nuclear test will be conducted by India. Then next is no first use. India is only going to use nuclear weapons if it is attacked by nuclear weapons, or it will be retaliation against the nuclear attack on Indian territory or Indian forces. The nuclear attack can only be authorized by civilian political leadership through Nuclear Command Authority. Nuclear Command Authority, I have already told you, it has a political council and executive council. Political council is headed by Prime Minister and executive council is headed by National Security Advisor. Then next, retaliation with nuclear weapon in case of major attack by biological or chemical weapon. So nuclear weapons can be used in case of a nuclear attack, in case of a biological attack or a chemical attack. In the conventional warfare, India is not going to use nuclear weapons until and unless it is attacked by these three means. Secondly, India is not going to use nuclear weapons against any non-nuclear weapon state. Next, commitment to goal of nuclear weapon free world through global, verifiable and non-discriminatory nuclear disarmament. Next is significance of India becoming nuclear weapon state. First of all, it improved the international standing of India. India has now become member of 3 out of 4 multilateral export control regimes. These export control regimes are MTCR, Wassenaar Arrangement, Australia Group. India is member of these 3 groups, and the fourth one is NSG, in which India is seeking membership, and China is blocking India's membership in that. Next is security situation along the border has also improved by ensuring a credible deterrent for the states. Next, India is among the foremost global military powers now. Energy security for future, India has installed generating capacity of 2225 megawatts in 1998-99, which has increased 205% to 6780 megawatts by financial year 2023. It has also led to transformation of its relation with the USA, and it is also an expression of India's technological capabilities. Why? Because India is now having access to international technology. For example, USA is now having a high-tech defense corporation with India, which is next step in this strategic partnership. The next is it has improved the perception of India and also has improved national pride, a sense of confidence in Indians. Now, next is, do we need to revise the no first use policy? No first use means that India is not going to use the nuclear weapon as a first incident. India is only going to use nuclear weapons when it is attacked by a nuclear weapon. So, do we need to revise this policy or we should stick with it? So, the question is this. So, first of all, why it has been criticized? It has been criticized because it limits the strategic space for Indian decision makers in crisis situations, where they have limited room to execute acceleration related measures. Second, continuous attacks like Kargil in 1999 and Mumbai attacks in 2008 are seen as evidence of the failure of nuclear deterrence. Now, what are the arguments in favor of NFU? First of all, it obviates preemption, which would otherwise place considerable pressure on Indian decision makers to carry out a nuclear first strike in the heat of a crisis. Because everyone is now going to demand that we have nuclear weapon, why we are not attacking the enemy states with it. So we are having a no first use policy, so it removes the pressure from the decision makers regarding a war. Next, it helps India to avoid the pitfalls of building a technologically advanced nuclear capability deployed on hair trigger alert, which is financially costly nuclear posture. So, what happens is that sometimes when we are not having such policy in place, then it is very small crisis can lead to a bigger war. So these things are avoided by this. Next, it also conveys nuclear restraint to the world and India's adversaries, ensuring stability. Then conventional attacks and incursions can be better tackled at a conventional level. Why to go for a nuclear weapon? Now, next one is thermonuclear device. Now, this is a new concept. In a thermonuclear device, it is a two-stage device in which the first stage is fission. A bigger molecule divides into two smaller molecules. And after that, these smaller molecules again combine and give rise to a bigger molecule. So while this molecule breaks, it releases an excess amount of energy. And when these atoms also join, it also releases excess amount of energy. So in a thermonuclear stage, first stage is fission trigger, then a fusion trigger. So it is a fusion boosted fission trigger as the first stage and a fusion secondary stage. So it has both the processes, atomic fission and nuclear fusion, to create an explosion. Now, what is a nuclear fission reaction? In a nuclear fission reaction, a neutron slams a larger atom and forces it and splits it into two smaller atoms, which releases enormous amount of energy. What is a nuclear fusion reaction? In which two atoms slam together to form a heavier atom, and it also releases a lot of amount of energy. Even in sun, the nuclear fusion reactions are going on, from where we get so much amount of energy. Now, next news is United Nations. During the 49th group of G7 summit, India questioned the United Nations ability to effectively prevent conflict. Why? Because there has been Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, recently there has been a conflict between Israel and Gaza. So, the UN's capability to prevent these conflicts, it is under question. Now, what is the United Nations? Its basic purpose was to maintain international peace and security, protecting human rights, delivering humanitarian aid, promoting sustainable development, and upholding international law. Total 190 total 190 member states are there, and India is a founding member of United Nations. The principal organs of United Nations are General Assembly, Security Council, International Court of Justice, Trusteeship Council, Secretariat, and Economic and Social Council. Why UN is not able to prevent the conflict and resolve them? First of all, Security Council dynamics. In the United Security Council, the provision of veto power is used for preventing UN to take any steps against the adversarial nations. For example, China uses veto power for its interest in Pakistan. Second, it has a limited enforcement mechanism. United Nations General Assembly lacks enforcement mechanism for its resolutions. In certain cases, when members are unwilling or unable to commit resources to implement and enforce these resolutions, the UN General Assembly becomes toothless. It becomes powerless to enforce that. Next, sovereignty and national interest. These values of nations hinder collective action and compromises the effectiveness of UN interventions. Then complexity and divisions are also there. Conflicts often involves deep-rooted political, economic, social, and religious factors that are difficult to address comprehensively. Next, lack of financial resources. This limits the UN's capacity to implement its initiatives. Now, next, what is the role played by United Nations historically? United Nations has historically it has contributed to maintenance of peace and security in the world. Peace agreements like Good Friday Arrangement in Northern Ireland and Comprehensive Peace Agreement in Sudan. These are successful. These are some successful agreements of the UN. Also, UN peacekeeping missions in various conflicted regions have been very effective. Next is decolonization and self-determination. It adopted the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and People in 1960, which helped numerous territories in transitioning from colonial rule to sovereign nation. Then human rights and international law. It has also set up initiatives like Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948, etc. for enforcement of human rights and international law. Then its contribution to sustainable development goals. In 2015, UN adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which includes 17 sustainable development goals. Then humanitarian assistance and relief through United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, WHO, World Food Program, which had transformed the life of millions of people. The next is, what is the role of India in resolving conflicts? First of all, India adopts mediation and diplomacy, and it has been successful in that part also, because India focuses on promoting dialogue, encouraging peaceful resolution, and facilitating reconciliation among conflicting parties. So India's approach is more of a long term and more of a stability oriented and humanitarian oriented. Second, India's contribution to non-aligned movement, because India was the founding member of NAM, and it advocated for peaceful resolution of global conflict and supported the principle of sovereignty, self-determination, and non-interference in the internal affairs of other nations. Then India also focuses on developmental cooperation, because India's approaches to address the global conflicts also emphasizes developmental cooperation. Next is counter-terrorism efforts. India effectively participates in the international counter-terrorism efforts and advocates for global cooperation to combat these threat. Next is peacekeeping operations. India's peacekeepers have played vital role in maintaining stability, protecting civilians, and facilitating peace process in countries like Lebanon, Congo, South Sudan, and Haiti, among others. Next, how UN can be more effective. First of all, strengthening conflict preventive efforts like mediation, reconciliation can be effectively used. Second, reforms in UNSC. Inclusion of a country like India as a permanent member will promote effective use of veto power. Next, improving peacekeeping operations, enhancing cooperation with regional organizations like African Union, European Union, or ASEAN can strengthen UN capability to address the conflicts. Next, UN should focus on addressing the root cause of conflict like poverty, inequality, governance related issues, and human rights violation. Then mobilizing sufficient resources and strengthening the responsibility to protect principle. It will promote the trust of people and countries in the UN. Third article is World Trade Organization. Now, India has appealed against the ruling by the settlement body of the WTO, which says that India violated its zero tariff commitment under the Information Technology Agreement. And what India says that during the signing of ITA, smartphones did not existed. That's why India is not bound to eliminate tariffs on such items. So what is now let's move on to WTO. What are the achievements of WTO? WTO have a very wide coverage. It is the largest trade body. It encompasses 85% of the population and 95% of the trade that happens across the world is done by WTO members. Next, it has transformed international law by bringing in binding rules for global trade, which have facilitated dramatic growth in cross-border business activity. So the contribution has been very good. Next is it has led to rise of global value chains, which now accounts for almost 70% of the merchandise trade. Now, WTO's non-discrimination, that is most favored nation principle, ensures that countries do not discriminate between trading partners, granting them the same favorable treatment given to any other member. Then the national treatment principle ensures that foreign goods and services are treated no less favorably than the domestic ones. So there are two principles, that is, first one is most favored nation, in which no discrimination is allowed between nations. Second is national treatment, in which no discrimination is allowed between the foreign goods and services and the domestic goods and services. Next you have is special provisions for developing and least developed countries, which involves GATT and GATS. So GATS and General Agreement on Trade in Services allow developing countries to have some preferential treatment. WTO also provides technical assistance and capacity building programs to help developing and least developed nations. Then WTO has also has a trade dispute mechanism which can be used extensively by avoiding unilateral responses to the dispute. The next is World Trade Organization. It came into being through the Marrakesh Agreement of 1994. And it was the conclusion of the Uruguay rounds, which was conducted from 1987 to 1994 of the multilateral trade negotiations. The agreement entered into force on January 1, 1995. WTO is a successor to the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, a group founded in 1948 whose rules created modern multilateral systems. Total 164 members are there in WTO, and it is headed by WTO Director General, overseeing the WTO Secretariat. What are the functions? The functions are basic: facilitating trade negotiations, monitoring the implementation of trade agreements, produces research on global trade and economic policy, and serves as a forum for settling trade dispute between countries. Now, what are the issues with WTO? First one is negotiation deadlocks. Consensus-based decision-making processes often resulted in negotiation deadlocks, making it difficult to reach meaningful agreements on critical issues such as agricultural subsidies, intellectual property rights, and market access. Next is developing country concerns. Developing countries argue that developed countries tend to dominate negotiations and have an advantage in shaping the rules to their benefit. Third, rising protectionism and bilateralism. These are the challenges to WTO. These are the issues or challenges to WTO. Next is rising protectionism and bilateralism. Several new issues have emerged since 1995, such as the linkage between the trade and climate change, so sustainable development goals, gender issues, and human rights. Next is members' development status. Concerns have been raised regarding ability of certain members to self-designate as developing countries and thereby to benefit from the special and differential treatment provisions. Next is inadequate monitoring mechanism. Experts raise concern that WTO is unable to identify and address the violations in its multilateral agreements in an effective and timely manner. So these are the issues with WTO. Now, what are the measures that are required to reform the WTO? First of all, dispute settlement mechanism should work properly. This is the basis of any organization. The justice system should be appropriate and it should work in a proper condition. So the dispute trade settlement mechanism should be functioning properly. Second, Transparency should be improved. Then there are some institutional reforms that are required. For example, WTO's decision-making process. It calls for creation of an executive committee so that the decisions can be taken in a faster manner. Then balancing the demands. WTO must balance the demands of the 21st century trade and unresolved old trade disputes. For example, Doha round, which is still not concluded. Then smaller countries should get due voice at WTO. What are other mechanisms? Strengthen the secretariat's role as an agenda setter in the WTO and enhancing its capacity to undertake research and collect data. Next, improved technical assistance to developing countries as well as other measures to facilitate their full participation. Now, next news is Group of Seven or G7. 49th summit of G7 was recently held in Hiroshima, Japan. India, along with countries like Australia, Brazil, were invited to the summit. India gave a 10-point action plan to address food, health, and development related problems currently facing the world. Major outcomes. Major outcomes of the summit. What are these? Economic resilience and economic security. Agreed to set up a coordination platform on economic coercion to counter any attempts to weaponize trading economic dependencies in the critical and emerging technologies such as microelectronics. They agreed to de-risk the commercial ties with China. The next is standard for artificial intelligence. It says development and adoption of international technical standards for trustworthy AI. Next is climate and energy. Members pledge to achieve net zero emission by 2050 and to limit global warming to 1.5 degree Celsius. They also endorse the G7 Energy Economy Action Plan, which emphasizes the importance of trade policies and main role in reaching net zero emissions. The next is resilient global food security. G7 produced a Hiroshima action statement on food security. Next, something about G7. It is an informal forum of the leading industrialized nations. It meets annually and discusses issues like global economic governance, international security, and energy policy, beside other issues and prevailing situations. Russia joined G7 in 1998 and G8 was created, but it was again excluded in 2014 after the takeover of Crimea. EU is not a member of G7 but attends its annual summit. Now, if we talk of G7, it accounts for 25% of the global carbon dioxide emissions. It accounts for 46% of the global GDP. 1/10 of the world's population lives in G7 countries. Next is, so these are the members of G7. Now, Russia is not a member of G7. What is the relevance of G7? First of all, economic power. The collective economic power allows them to shape the global economic policies, coordinate financial regulations, and address economic challenges such as trade imbalances, currency stability, and financial crisis. Political influence and international cooperation. They have a strong voice in shaping global agendas such as conflicts, nuclear proliferation, etc. Next is symbolic importance. G7 represents a select group of influential democracies with shared values and interest. Next, catalyst for global governance. It plays a key role in the creation of international financial institutions like Financial Action Task Force. What is the 10-point agenda plan that is given by India? So India said that there should be inclusive food system that protects the most vulnerable. We need to depoliticize the global fertilizer supply chain, and an alternate model for fertilizer should be developed. Food wastage should be stopped to strengthen the food security. Then development models inspired by the need of global south are required and promote holistic healthcare. Adopting millets, resilient healthcare system should be created, and we should promote digital healthcare. Also ensure mobility of healthcare professionals. So this is the 10-point agenda that was given by India. Now next is G7 and India. What are the opportunities? Expansion of G7. If India becomes a member of G7 like other potential countries like Australia, then India is this year's G20 president, which is seen as a crucial bridge between G7 and global South countries. Then it will also help in countering China, as it is an important issue of G7 summits. And good relations with G7 will enhance India's voice at the global level. It will also further strengthen the bilateral relations with the member countries like US, France, etc. What are the concerns of India between India and G7? So the concerns are G7 has been vocal against Russia and after it invaded Ukraine, and India's stand has been more of a diplomatic one. At WTO, G7 has conflicting views. For example, it opposes food subsidies while India is in the favor of food subsidies. Next, initiatives like Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment are not implemented in letter and spirit, which is one of the initiatives of G7. Also, G7 is not taking effective measures for reforming global institutions and groupings to reflect modern day geopolitical realities. Now, next we come to is ADB India or India Country Partnership Strategy 2023-27. ADB means Asian Development Bank has launched a new country partnership strategy for India, CPS for India. This CPS 2023-27 will advance ABG strategy 2027 seven operational priorities. Under this strategy, Asian Development Bank aims to expand its vision to achieve a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and the Pacific, while sustaining its efforts to eradicate extreme poverty. Next, cost sharing arrangements. ABD and domestic cost sharing in the ratio of 730 for the overall loan portfolio during the CPS system. There are three pillars to this strategy. First one is accelerate structural transformation and job creation, then promote climate resilient green growth, and deepen social and economic inclusiveness. Under the first pillar, that is structural transformation and job creation, the investment should be supported and logistics and industry urban skilling nexus should be created. Secondly, focus on MSMEs and help them to integrate with the global value chain. Next, augment the government capacity to catalyze the private sector. Then promote climate resilient green growth. It will support clean energy transition, transport decarbonization, circular economy, and climate proofing of the physical infrastructure. Next, deepen social and economic inclusiveness. In this, life cycle approach in human capital formation should be adopted. Improved access to quality basic urban services and increasing agricultural productivity through modernizing irrigation and introduction of improved inputs such as clean planting material, etc. Then what is Asian Development Bank? It was established in 1966. It has 68 members, 49 are from Asia and Pacific, and 19 are from outside. India is a founding member of Asian Development Bank. There are two categories of the members. One are non-borrowing members and other are borrowing members. So non-borrowing members include US and Japan, which have the highest shareholding of 15.6%. Borrowing members include China and India, which have shareholding of 6.4 and 6.3% respectively. The mandate is to assist members and partners by providing them loans, technical assistance, and promote socio-economic development in the member states. Then it facilitates policy dialogues, provides advisory services, and helps in mobilizing financial resources and export credit sources. What are the key reports? Asian Development Outlook 2023, Asian Economic Integration Report 2023, and key indicators for Asia and the Pacific. About India and Asian Development Bank at the end of 2022, ABD has committed $52.6 billion in 605 public sector loans and 8 billion in the private sector investment. Important projects include Visakhapatnam Chennai Industrial Corridor Development Program, Nhava Sheva Container Terminal Financing Project, Chennai Metro Rail Investment Project, Assam South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation Corridor, Connectivity Improvement Project, etc. Now, next area is Western Asia. Saudi Arabia hosted a special meeting of the National Security Advisors for India, US, and UAE. It was helped to advance the shared vision of all four countries which to secure the prosperous West Asia. It is seen as a success for India's Look West policy. Significance, what is the significance? Ties with the West Asia, it will help in deepening India's ties with the West Asia. It will help in strengthening the global position. For example, new Quad development will further align India with other major powers like Russia, Europe, and China to address its national and regional concerns strategically. Next is peace and security. It will facilitate greater engagement across Western Indian Ocean, and which lies between India's Suez Canal and South Africa. 12% of the world trade passes through Suez Canal, which links Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean via Red Sea. It will help to minimize threats like maritime piracy, illegal smuggling and of the drugs, weapons, and terrorism. Next, it will also facilitate access to market by will enhance bilateral trade and access to strategic markets in West Asia, and will also help in significant job creation in India. Also, it can be utilized to promote acceptance for Indian rupee in the region, especially for oil imports. Next, countering China. China facilitated diplomatic breakthrough between South Arabia and Iran, which indicated a significant escalation to Chinese diplomatic footprint in the region. So, this initiative will help India in countering China. In 2021, Iran and China have signed a long gestating 25-year cooperation. It thus becomes pertinent for India to establish its footprint to a larger extent in the region. Next is India, Israel, United Arab Emirates, and United States. I2U2 was the first mentioned in October 2021 following Abraham Accords between Israel and UAE to deal with the issues of maritime security, infrastructure, and transport in the region. It was established as an international forum to discuss common areas of mutual interest, strengthen economic partnership in trade and investment. Areas of cooperation, it has identified 6 areas of cooperation in the water, energy, transportation, space, health, and food security. Also, it intends to mobilize private sector capital and expertise to help modernize infrastructure, low carbon development pathways for industries, improve public health, promote development of critical emerging and green technologies. What are the issues with this new group? First of all, there is lack of clarity. What are going to be its strategic goals? Secondly, asymmetry among members. The member nations have asymmetric powers. For example, US is militarily stronger as compared to India, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Then cooperation. They have conflicting positions on how to deal with China and Russia. You know, wherever which country stands. Next is strategic autonomy. The group may pose challenge for India. For example, US sponsored security deal would complicate India's strategic autonomy in the Middle East as a state that chooses not to take sides. Next, internal conflict in the West Asia, internal conflicts in Arab world may lead to significant partners of India like Iran splitting from the former into another group. Next, developing situations might lead to creation of two groups, China, Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, while India, Saudi Arabia, USA, and UAE are likely to be on the other side. Next comes India and Pacific Island countries, PIC. Now, this India Pacific Island Cooperation Summit was held in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, and India announced its 12-point development plan for the Pacific Island nations. Now, this FIPIC is manifestation of India's Act East policy and Indo-Pacific policy, and it will help in fostering South-South cooperation. This forum was launched in 2014. This Forum for India Pacific Island Cooperation was launched in 2014, and it includes 14 of the island states that are Cook Islands, Fiji, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, New Palau, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu and Vanuatu. Other key information: Pacific Islands consist of three major groups of islands: Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. On this, the question can be asked to you in the prelims. Next is the significance of Pacific Island countries. First of all is geostrategy. Sea lanes of Indo-Pacific region are critical to the international commerce, and Pacific Islands are at the center of the PIC. Second is maritime security. India with its rising naval capabilities has begun to look beyond the east of Malacca. Next is economic. It has resource rich exclusive economic zones and are source for natural and mineral resources like liquefied natural gas. Next, some of the PICs have EEZ that are larger than the land mass and EEZ of India taken together. Kiribati is one of the smallest countries alone has a EEZ of 3.5 million square kilometers. Then regional and global engagements. Engagement with PIC allows India to strengthen its network of alliances and partnerships in the regional and the global organizations such as United Nations. Then cultural ties. Fiji and Papua New Guinea have significant Indian diaspora communities with historical ties to India. It contributes to the promotion of Indian culture, language, education, trade within the Pacific Island nations. Next is competition from global powers such as China, Japan, United States, and Russia. Unutilized trade potential. Total annual trade is about $300 billion between India and Pacific Island countries. Then emphasis on traditional approach. India's foreign policy is focused much more on the Indian Ocean region, and Pacific region including PIC was relatively neglected. Limited engagement. Geographical distance. The long distances increase the cost and time required for travel, trade, and communication. Second, people to people contacts. In comparison to West and East, there is less emphasis on people to people contact with PICs. What are the initiatives launched for PIC? One is Business Accelerator for FIPIC in 2015, then Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief on several occasions such as COVID-19 pandemic, then establishment of India UN Development Partnership Fund in 2017, setting up of a special USD of $1 billion for adapting to climate change and clean energy, then providing annual grant in AIDS, extending visa on arrival at Indian airports, Pan-Pacific Island e-network to promote digital connectivity. Next is relevance of Indo-Pacific. Nearly 50% of India's trade is centered in the Indo-Pacific region, and the Indian Ocean carries 90% of the India's trade and its energy sources. India's maritime security is linked with it. Domination of China has increased. Enhancing trade and investment cooperation, promoting sustainable development. Other interests include combating maritime pollution, regulating illegal, unregulated, etc. Now next we come to is what are the initiatives that have been taken. In 2019, India set up the Indo-Pacific Wing in the Ministry of External Affairs. In 2020, Oceania Division was created. Then Free and Open Indo-Pacific idea was launched. Forums like Security and Growth for All India, all in the region, that is SAGAR in 2015 was launched. Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative was launched in 2019, and also groups like Quad are having special emphasis on Indo-Pacific. So these are the initiatives that have been taken for the Pacific region by India. Now last topic is news in short. First news is India European Free Trade Association EFTA Trade Pact. Ministry of Commerce and Industry has discussed the modalities of engagement for working towards a comprehensive trade and economic partnership agreement with representatives from both the states. TIPA is a free trade FTA between India and members of EFTA. EFTA members, who are the members? Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. Under FTA, two trading partners significantly reduce or eliminate custom duties on the maximum number of goods traded between them, beside easing norms to promote trade in services and investment. EFTA is an intergovernmental organization for promotion and intensification of free trade. EFTA countries are not part of European Union and was founded as an alternative for states that did not wish to join the European community. Next, India trade with EFTA. India is the ninth largest trading partner. India's exports stand at US dollar 1.67 billion in 2022-23 against US dollars of 1.7 billion in 2021-22. Imports around 15 billion USD in 2022-2023. So we are actually importing more and exporting less to the EFTA countries. Next is North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO plus. So China Select Committee of US House recommended that India should be a part of the NATO plus. NATO plus 5 is a security arrangement with countries between NATO and 5 aligned nations like Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Israel and South Korea to boost the global defense cooperation. It is a 30-member military alliance with 29 European nations and 2 American nations. Other related information with it, with the NATO, major NATO, non-NATO ally status. So this status is a designation under US law that provides for foreign partners with certain benefits in the areas of defense, trade and security cooperation. This status provides military and economic privileges and does not entail any security commitment to the designated countries. So it is basically military and economic privileges are given, but there is no security commitment under this status. USA has designated 30 other countries including Japan, South Korea, Israel as MNA. India is not accorded this statement. India is not a major non-NATO ally. Status has not been accorded to India. Next is Israel-Palestine conflict. Now, if we go for the history part of this, the first part is Balfour Declaration by Britain in 1917. Objective of that was to provide a national home to the Jewish community in Palestine. Between 1920 to 94, there was a lot of Jews migration to the Palestine. In 1947, UN voted to split Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab state, which was rejected by the Arab states, and it led to 1948 First Arab-Israeli War. At ceasefire, Jordan occupied West Bank, Egypt occupied Gaza, Jerusalem was divided between Israel and Jordan. In 1968, Six-Day War happened and between Arabs and Israelis, and at the end of it, Israel gained territorial control over Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and Golan Heights from Syria. Israel still occupies West Bank and the East Jerusalem. India has adopted a de-hyphenation policy, which means that India's relation with Israel would stand on its own merits, independent and separate from India's relation with Palestinians. So India is going to have a completely segregated relation with Israel as well as with the Palestine state, or as well as with India's stand that on the Palestine. Next is advanced notices. Indo-Pacific Economic Framework is a US-led economic grouping comprises of 14 partners including India, which represents 40% of global GDP and 28% of the global goods and services trade. It is based on 4 pillars. First is trade, then supply chains, then clean energy, decarbonization and infrastructure, and last one is tax and anti-corruption. The members are not required to join all the 4 pillars. India has not joined the trade pillar. What are the benefits? It eliminates surprises, gives time for adjustment and minimizes loss of trading partners. It also provides safeguard against export restrictions that can go as far as disturbing the macroeconomic indicators of a country. What are the concerns? It can lead to disruptions and opportunities for extracting undue gain that will emerge. Next, might expose the countries putting tariffs and restrictions to pressure from fellow members of IPEF. It also puts limit on the powers of member countries to pursue an independent tariff policy. India has also raised concern that such an exercise could amount to violation of WTO rules as well as possible loss of policy space to the government. The next is World Bank has launched the Business Ready project, which is also known as Be Ready. It is a more balanced and transparent approach towards evaluating a country's business and investment climate and to make it ready for a dynamic private sector. Now it has came and it has replaced the World Bank's group's earlier Doing Business report. So Be Ready has replaced the Doing Business project of World Bank. Now, about this Be Ready project, in this there are 10 topics which are covering a firm's life cycle. It involves business entry, business location, utility services, labor, financial services, international trade, taxation, dispute resolution, market competition, and business insolvency. Now it is covering 54 economies in its report of 2024. It will scale up to 180 economies by 2025-26. It will evaluate the standpoint of private sector development as a whole. It aims to collect both de jure information and de facto measurements of all the parameters. It will publish all data collected and calculation methodology used. Also, no such limitation is expected to cover wide range of cities in an economy. So now multiple cities can be covered here. Next is Innovative Finance Facility for Climate in Asia and the Pacific, IFCAP. It was launched by Asian Development Bank. It is a multi-dollar financing partnership for accelerated action on the climate change in Asia and Pacific, as the name suggests. It is for the first time that any multilateral development bank has launched a program of this kind. So basically a MCQ question can be asked on this topic. Now World Bank President Indo-American Ajay Banga has been appointed as the World Bank President. Then next is Washington Declaration. It is signed by US and South Korea. It advocated for a nuclear deterrence policy in the region. The Washington Declaration of 1994. It relates with the Israel-Jordan war, which ended the war between them. The next is International Organization for Migration, IOM. Amy Pope of USA is said to become the first woman head of IOM. IOM was established in 1951 as a leading intergovernmental organization in the field of migration. It is related to the Organization of the United Nations system. It has 175 members and India is one of the member of the International Organization for Migration. It helps to ensure orderly and humane management of migration to promote international cooperation in the migration issues. Now next is 6th Indian Ocean Conference. This was jointly organized by Bangladesh Foreign Ministry and India Foundation, a New Delhi based think tank. The theme was Peace, Prosperity and Partnership for a Resilient Future. First summit was held in 2016 in Singapore, and Sagar was launched in 2016 to promote the cooperation among the state. So this Sagar was also launched in this first IOC summit. Next last topic for the day is silkworm eating strategy. This is a strategy coined for China's regular incursion in the Taiwan. It simply means that there is a gradual encroachment by a country by successfully making inroads in another territory. Its Chinese equivalent in Western notion is salami slicing technique. So with this we cover the international relations part of the May 2023 current affairs. This has been a long video, I know, but the topic was also large. So let's meet tomorrow with the economic portion. Thank you very much.